Captain Thrax stretched his 4 muscular arms and cracked his neck joints with a sound like breaking branches. The command bridge of the Vorthok flagship Nightmare's Edge hummed with the familiar energy of another conquest about to begin. Through the massive viewing portal, Earth hung like a delicate blue ornament against the star-filled darkness. Beautiful, defenseless, and completely unaware of what was coming. Another day, another species to terrify into submission, Thrax muttered, examining his razor-sharp claws with casual indifference. In his 3 centuries of military service, he'd personally overseen the conquest of 47 worlds. The pattern never changed. Arrive, project overwhelming fear, watch entire civilizations collapse within hours. It was almost boring at this point, but that boredom paid well. Vorthok Dominion controlled over 300 star systems, and their method was brutally efficient. Why waste resources on prolonged warfare when you could simply break an enemy's will to fight? Fear was the ultimate weapon, clean, psychological, and absolutely devastating to any rational mind, Lieutenant Krex. His younger second-in-command approached with the standard pre-invasion briefing tablet. Sir, preliminary scans of the target species are complete. They call themselves humans and appear to be a typical Class C civilization. Primitive nuclear weapons, chemical propulsion spacecraft, and basic electromagnetic communications. Thrax barely glanced at the data. Let me guess, they're still fighting wars with projectile weapons and explosive devices. Charmingly. Primitive, he chuckled, a sound like grinding metal. What's their fear response threshold? Standard mammalian terror reactions, Captain? Elevated stress hormones, fight-flight responses, and social bonding behaviors when threatened. It's nothing we haven't seen 1,000 times before. Perfect. Thrax activated the fleet-wide communication system with a gesture. Yes. All ships assume. Standard intimidation formation. Deploy the fear ships to major population centers. I want terror wave generators at maximum output within the next standard hour. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. They'd done this dance so many times it felt routine. Thrax watched through the tactical displays as his fleet's 12 massive dreadnoughts began their descent toward Earth's atmosphere. Each ship was a masterpiece of psychological warfare, biomechanical monstrosities designed to trigger primal terror in any organic mind. Writhing metallic tentacles covered their hulls, pulsing with sickly bioluminescent patterns that seemed to crawl across the eye. The ships themselves defied conventional geometry, appearing to shift and change shape as they moved, creating an unsettling optical illusion that human brains simply couldn't process without experiencing deep, instinctual dread. Terror wave. Generators are online, Captain, reported his weapons officer. All psychic amplifiers are calibrated for human neural frequencies. Excellent. Begin the fear broadcast. Let's see how quickly these humans break. The invisible waves of pure terror began washing over Earth's major cities. New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow. Millions of human minds suddenly flooded with visions of their deepest, most paralyzing fears. The technology was beautiful in its simplicity. Tap directly into a species' collective unconscious, amplify their worst nightmares, and broadcast them with enough psychic force to overwhelm rational thought. Thrax settled back in his command chair, expecting the usual response. First would come the screaming raw, animal terror as entire populations realized they faced something beyond their comprehension. Then the silence as shock set in. Finally, the surrender broadcasts as whatever passed for their leadership begged for mercy, but something was wrong. Instead of the expected silence, the human communication channels exploded with noise, not screaming, shouting. Angry, defiant shouting that made Thrax's antennae twitch with confusion. Contact, contact! All units. We have hostile alien vessels over major population centers. This is General Patricia Hayes at NORAD. All military personnel report to stations immediately. This is not a drill. Phoenix Squadron, this is Phoenix Leader. Got those birds in the air now. We've got company. Thrax leaned forward, his 4 eyes focusing intently on the communication intercepts. The fear was working. His sensors clearly detected massive spikes in human stress hormones across the planet. Their terror response was textbook perfect. But instead of paralysis, it seemed to be triggering something else entirely. "Sir," Lieutenant Krex said, his voice uncertain for the first time in years. "The humans are... mobilizing. Their military forces are responding to our presence as if they intend to fight." Thrax finished, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. A cold sensation crept up his spine, something he hadn't felt since his first combat mission decades ago. That's impossible. Fear waves are at maximum intensity, to be catatonic with terror. But the tactical displays told a different story. Across Earth's surface, human military installations were lighting up like deadly Christmas trees. Fighter aircraft were launching from bases worldwide. Missile defense systems were coming online. Warships were leaving port. And strangest of all, the human civilian population wasn't fleeing in panic. They were gathering in the streets, many carrying primitive weapons. Their faces twisted not with fear, but with something Thrax had never seen in a prey species: rage. Captain, his communications officer, called out, "You need to hear this transmission from their military leadership." The bridge speakers crackled to life with a human voice, female, steady, and absolutely furious. "To whoever you are, wherever you came from, you picked the wrong planet to threaten. We've been perfecting the art of warfare for thousands of years, fighting everything from saber-toothed cats to each other. You want to scare us? Get in line behind nuclear war, climate change, and tax season? This is Admiral Rebecca Stone, and you just declared war on a species that considers impossible odds a personal challenge." Thrax felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: uncertainty. His terror weapons were functioning perfectly. The humans were genuinely afraid, could sense their fear radiating across the planet like heat from a bonfire. But instead of breaking them, the fear seemed to be fueling them. What kind of species fought harder when they were terrified? The first human fighters were already screaming toward his fleet, their primitive missiles locked and loaded. X realized with growing unease that he might have made a critical error in judgment. These humans weren't just another conquest. They were something else entirely. Colonel Jake Mitchell had faced enemy fire in Iraq, survived 3 helicopter crashes in Afghanistan, and once spent 18 hours in a North Korean prison camp. But nothing in his 20-year military career had prepared him for the psychic assault that hit him as he sprinted across the tarmac toward his F-35. Lightning. The alien terror waves slammed into his mind like a sledgehammer, flooding his consciousness with images so horrific they defied description. He saw his daughter Sarah being torn apart by creatures that shouldn't exist. He watched his hometown of Denver burning while shadows with too many teeth hunted the survivors. Every nightmare he'd ever had as a child came rushing back in high definition. Clarity, amplified 1,000-fold, and served up with the absolute certainty that this was his future. His hands shook so violently he could barely grip the ladder rungs. Sweat poured down his face despite the cold October air. His heart hammered against his ribs like it was trying to escape his chest. But Jake Mitchell hadn't become one of the Air Force's top pilots by giving up when things got scary. "Phoenix Squadron, this is Phoenix Leader," he said into his radio, surprised by how steady his voice sounded despite the chaos in his head. "Time to earn our pay, boys. Whatever these things are pumping into our brains, remember, fear is just." Another instrument reading: "You don't let turbulence crash your plane, and you don't let alien mind games stop you from doing your job." Above Manhattan, the Vorthok dreadnoughts hung like mechanical tumors against the bright blue sky. Their biomechanical hulls pulsed with nauseating patterns of light that seemed to crawl across Jake's vision even when he wasn't looking directly at them. Writhing metallic tentacles reached down from their undersides like the arms of some cosmic octopus, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with malevolent energy. But you know what? Jake had seen worse. Well, maybe not worse, but definitely uglier. His ex-wife's divorce lawyer came to mind. The streets below told a story that would have shocked any military strategist. Instead of mass panic and evacuation, New York's 8 million residents were doing something completely unexpected. They were getting angry. Really, really angry. "Phoenix Leader, this is Ground Control," came the voice of Captain Lisa Chen from the Manhattan Command Bunker. You need to see what's happening down here. The civilian population isn't running. They're fighting back with everything they can get their hands on. Jake banked his fighter to survey the streets, and what he saw made him grin despite the alien. Nightmares still clawing at his mind. From his aerial view, he could see people streaming out of apartment buildings and office towers, not fleeing, but mobilizing. Construction workers carried nail guns and acetylene torches. NYPD officers had broken into sporting goods stores to distribute hunting rifles to civilians. A group of Army veterans had somehow acquired military-grade rocket launchers and were setting up firing positions in Central Park. "This is Sergeant Maria Rodriguez with the 82nd Airborne," crackled over the emergency frequency. "Any alien sons of bitches listening to this channel, let me educate you about something. You picked the wrong species to try and scare. We're the descendants of people who crossed oceans in wooden boats, survived ice ages with pointy sticks, and turned world wars into a hobby. Your little light show? We call that Tuesday." I couldn't help but laugh. Even with cosmic horror beaming directly into her brain, Rodriguez sounded like she was ready to fight the entire universe with her bare hands. That was the thing about humans. They were absolutely terrible at knowing when they were. OUTMAT shade. The first wave of human fighters was already climbing toward the alien ships. F-22 Raptors, F-35 Lightnings, even some older F-16s that had been pulled out of reserve storage. The pilot's radio chatter painted a clear picture of men and women who were scared out of their minds, but too stubborn to quit. "This is Viper 2-1. I can barely see straight from whatever they're doing to our heads, but I've got missile lock. Viper 2-3 here. My instruments are going crazy, but I'm tracking Bogey Alpha 1, Fox 3. Phoenix 2 to Phoenix Leader Jake. These things are making me see my mother-in-law everywhere, but I'm pressing the attack anyway." The Vorthok had expected easy targets. Terror-stricken pilots flying in blind panic, easy pickings for their advanced weapon systems. Instead, they found themselves facing something their psychological warfare manuals had never prepared them for. Warriors, who flew straight into their deepest fears and used terror as rocket fuel for righteous fury. Lieutenant Tom Walsh was Phoenix Squadron's youngest pilot at 24, fresh out of the academy with a newborn daughter at home. The alien fear beams hit him harder than most, showing him vivid images of little Emma growing up without a father, of his wife Jennifer crying at his funeral, of everything he'd never get to see or do. But Tom Walsh had grown up in Detroit, where you learned early that the world was full of things trying to break you. The trick was to break them first. "Phoenix Leader, this is Phoenix 7. Tom's voice came over the radio. Tight with controlled terror, but absolutely determined. "I'm taking heavy fire, but I've got a clean shot at their shield generators. Going in hot." Jake watched through his targeting system as Tom's F-35 dove straight toward the nearest Vorthok ship. Alien energy beams lighting up the sky around him like deadly fireworks. The kid was flying the kind of aggressive attack run that would have gotten him. Court-martialed in peacetime diving at impossible angles, pulling G-forces that should have knocked him unconscious. Dancing through defensive fire that could have vaporized a city block. Then the inevitable happened. A direct hit from an alien beam weapon caught Tom's fighter dead center. The F-35 came apart like a paper airplane in a hurricane, pieces of metal and composite materials spinning away in all directions. But Tom Walsh had one last card to play. "Tell my wife I love her," his voice crackled over the radio, barely audible through the static. "And tell these ugly sons of bitches that humans don't go down easy." The explosion was magnificent and terrible. Tom had somehow managed to detonate his remaining missiles in a chain reaction that tore through the alien ship's protective shields like they were made of tissue paper. The blast lit up the Manhattan skyline brighter than the 4th of July, and when the smoke cleared, the Vorthok vessel was trailing green fire and falling toward the Hudson River. Jake felt tears on his cheeks, whether from grief or pride. Couldn't tell. But he knew one thing for certain. These aliens had just learned their first lesson about humanity. When you threaten their families, their homes, their future, humans don't break. They become absolutely, beautifully, terrifyingly dangerous And this was just the beginning. Admiral Rick Stone had commanded carrier battle groups through 3 major conflicts, survived a terrorist attack on the USS Cole, and once spent 72 hours coordinating rescue operations during Hurricane Katrina. But standing in the Pentagon's underground war room, watching humanity's desperate fight for survival unfold across a dozen massive screens, he felt something he'd never experienced before. Pride so fierce it actually hurt. The aliens' psychological warfare had backfired in the most spectacular way possible. Instead of paralyzing humanity with fear, they'd done something far worse for their own survival. They'd pissed off 8 billion apex predators who'd spent their entire evolutionary history turning every threat into either dinner or a learning experience. Status report. Stone barked, his weathered face illuminated by the glow of tactical displays showing battles raging across 6 continents. Colonel Jennifer Hayes, his chief intelligence officer, looked up from her station with something between amazement and disbelief. "Sir, London's not just holding, they're advancing. The RAF has shot down 2 alien ships over the Thames, and the SAS somehow managed to board a 3rd one. Early reports suggest they're actually winning the close-quarters combat." Stone nodded grimly. Of course they were. The British had perfected the art of polite violence over centuries of empire building. What about Moscow? The Russians are? Well, they're being Russian, sir. President Volkov ordered a nuclear submarine to ram one of the alien ships in the Baltic. Direct impact. Both vessels destroyed, but the explosion took out the alien shield generators. Their Baltic fleet is now pounding the remaining ships with everything they've got. Casualties? It's heavy on both sides, but sir, the civilian population isn't evacuating. They're joining the fight. That was the part that made Stone's chest swell with something between terror and admiration. On every screen, in every city, ordinary people were doing extraordinary things. Tokyo, sushi chefs were using their knives to cut alien tech salvaged from crash sites, somehow jury-rigging the components into improvised weapons. In Sydney, surfers were using their boards to paddle out to damaged alien ships, carrying waterproof explosives donated by mining companies. But it was the American response that truly showcased humanity's particular brand of beautiful insanity. In Kansas, wheat farmers had organized themselves into mechanized cavalry units, using combine harvesters as mobile weapons platforms. They'd welded steel plates to their machines and mounted everything from hunting rifles to military surplus rocket launchers on top. The sight of a $100,000 piece of agricultural equipment charging across cornfields while firing anti-tank missiles at flying alien ships was something that would have been hilarious if it weren't so effective. "Sir, you need to see this feed from Detroit," called out Lieutenant Commander Sarah Walsh from the communications station. The main screen switched to a street-level view of Motor City, where the alien terror beams should have reduced the population to gibbering wrecks. Instead, Stone watched auto workers emerging from factories with improvised weapons that looked like they'd been designed by caffeinated engineers with access to unlimited scrap metal. Automatic nail guns had been converted into rapid-fire projectile weapons. Welding torches had been turned into short-range flamethrowers. Someone had actually managed to mount a car engine on wheels and use it as a battering ram. "Are those civilians using a Ford F-150 as artillery?" Stone asked, squinting at the screen. "Yes, sir. They've somehow rigged the truck's engine to fire its pistons like a cannon. It's actually working." Stone had to suppress a laugh. "Leave it to Detroit to turn car parts into weapons of war." These people had been building machines designed to go fast and hit hard for over a century. Of course, they'd figure out how to weaponize them in an afternoon. But the real revelation came when the feed switched to the American South. In places like Alabama, Tennessee, and Texas, the alien invasion had run headfirst into something even more dangerous than military resistance. Really annoyed rednecks with too much firepower and not enough sense to be properly scared. "Mother of God," breathed Colonel Hayes. "Is that man using a crossbow to fire dynamite at an alien ship?" "Yes, ma'am," replied the communications officer. Billy Bob Jenkins, age 47, unemployed coal miner from West Virginia. He's apparently been preparing for this his entire life without knowing it. The tactical display showed Jenkins and about 50% of his neighbors conducting what could only be described as guerrilla warfare against a grounded alien vessel. They'd surrounded it using four-wheelers and pickup trucks, then proceeded to attack it with every weapon in their considerable personal arsenals: hunting rifles, military surplus equipment, homemade explosives, and in one memorable case, a Civil War rear cannon that someone had apparently been keeping in their barn for just such an occasion. "The aliens are retreating from that position, sir," reported Hayes. "They can't handle the psychological pressure of fighting people who think this is the most fun they've had since deer season." Stone turned to address the room full of officers, analysts, communications specialists, who were coordinating humanity's defense. These men and women had trained their entire careers for conventional warfare, tank battles, naval engagements, air-to-air combat. None of them had ever imagined they'd be coordinating a global resistance movement that included farmers, mechanics, college students, and retirees, armed with hardware store supplies and righteous anger. "All units, this is Admiral Stone," he said into the global communications network, his voice carrying to every military base, every improvised fighting position, every group of civilians who decided that today was a good day to fight aliens. "The enemy came here thinking they could break us with fear. They wanted to show us what terror looked like." He paused, looking around at the faces of his staff, faces that showed exhaustion, determination, and the kind of grim satisfaction that comes from watching bullies get exactly what they deserve. "Well, let's show them what happens when you threaten our families, our homes, our future. Let's show them what 8 billion years of evolution looks like when it gets properly motivated. No quarter, no retreat, no surrender. This is our house, and we're about to teach these visitors some manners." The response came thundering back through the communications system from every corner of the globe. Voices in dozens of languages, but united in their message: "Hoorah! Hell yeah! Let's finish this. Da. We. Suh." And from somewhere in Texas, distinctly audible over the radio, "Y'all picked the wrong damn planet." Stone smiled as he watched the tactical displays update with new human victories. Had made a critical error in judgment. They'd assumed that fear would paralyze their victims. Instead, they'd awakened something far more dangerous: a species that had survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and disco music. A species that considered impossible odds a personal insult. But as he watched the battle unfold, Stone noticed something that made his blood run cold. The alien ships weren't just retreating randomly, they were regrouping, forming a new pattern in Earth's upper atmosphere. Whatever came next was going to be bigger. Captain Marcus Webb gripped the bridge railing of the USS Righteous Fury as another alien energy blast tore through the water just 50 meters from his port side, sending a geyser of superheated steam into the air. His destroyer had been built to fight other destroyers, maybe take on a frigate if the odds were good. It definitely hadn't been designed to trade punches with a mile-long alien dreadnought. It looked like it had been assembled from spare parts of a mechanical nightmare. But 6 hours into humanity's first interstellar war, Webb had learned something that would have made Darwin himself weep with pride. Humans didn't just adapt to survive, they evolved in real time, mid-battle, while people were shooting at them. Chief Engineer Rodriguez burst onto the bridge, her uniform covered in grease and what looked suspiciously like alien blood. "You're not going to believe what we've accomplished down in engineering?" Webb ducked as another energy beam sizzled. Overhead, close enough to singe his eyebrows, "Rodriguez, unless you've figured out how to turn this rust bucket into the Enterprise, I'm not sure I want to hear it." "Better, sir. Remember that piece of alien hull we pulled out of the water after Lieutenant Walsh took down their first ship? Well, my boys have been playing with it for the past 3 hours, and we've managed to jury-rig their own energy cores to our missile systems." Webb stared at her like she'd just announced she'd invented time travel during her coffee break. "Did what now?" "We reverse-engineered their power source, sir. It turns out their technology isn't that different from ours, just about 1,000 years more advanced. But the basic principles are the same. We've rerouted their energy cores through our Tomahawk guidance systems. It's one shot, and we're either heroes or atoms. This was the moment that perfectly captured humanity's approach to problem solving when faced with superior technology. Steal it, improve it, and then use it to blow up whoever was dumb enough to leave it lying around in the first place. Webb actually laughed as another alien beam weapon missed his ship by mere meters, the energy discharge turning a nearby seagull into vapor. Rodriguez, you magnificent, slightly insane genius. How long do you need? 30 seconds to finish the connection, sir. You've got 20. Across the globe, the same pattern was repeating with the kind of beautiful chaos that only humans could orchestrate. In the North Sea, a British submarine crew had somehow managed to capture an intact alien fighter craft. Instead of studying it carefully in a laboratory like sensible people, they'd stripped out its weapon systems and bolted them to their torpedo tubes. The HMS Triumph was now firing alien plasma torpedoes at alien ships, which had to be some kind of cosmic irony. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, a Japanese fishing fleet had turned their vessels into an improvised navy, using nothing but nets, harpoons, and the kind of stubborn determination that had built an island nation into an industrial powerhouse. They were actually capturing alien technology from the water and delivering it to their military. Enterprising fishing captain had managed to lasso an alien fighter with his nets, was now towing it back to port like the world's most expensive catch of the day. But it was the Americans who were truly showcasing humanity's talent for creative destruction. At Cape Canaveral, NASA engineers had done something that would have made their insurance companies weep. They'd loaded the International Space Station with every explosive device they could find, evacuated the crew, and then crashed the entire thing into an alien mothership. The collision had created a debris field that was now orbiting Earth-like, a protective ring of very angry metal, making it impossible for alien reinforcements to land safely. "Sir," called out his communications officer, "you need to hear this transmission from the USS Montana." The radio crackled to life with the voice of Captain Jennifer Hayes. "This is Montana Actual. We've figured out how to hack their communication frequencies. Turns out these things use a form of psychic communication that our radio equipment can actually interfere with. We're now broadcasting the sound of human war cries directly into their command channels." "Over." Webb grinned like a wolf. Of course they were. "Leave it to the Navy to turn psychological warfare into a radio show. What are we broadcasting?" "Everything. Sir, Marine Corps cadences, Viking battle songs, that scene from Braveheart where Mel Gibson yells freedom. We've even got someone playing death metal at maximum volume." Aliens seemed to find it ... disturbing. That was humanity in a nutshell. When faced with an enemy that used fear as a weapon, they responded by playing heavy metal music at them through stolen alien technology. Meanwhile, aboard the Vorthok flagship Nightmare's Edge, Captain Thrax was experiencing something that no member of his species had felt in over 3 centuries. Genuine, bone-deep terror. His tactical displays showed a picture that defied everything the Vorthok knew about conquest. In just 6 hours, these primitive humans had gone from helpless victims to a threat that was actively evolving during combat. They were stealing his technology, improving it, and using it against him with a speed that seemed impossible. "Sir," Lieutenant Krex reported, his voice tight with fear, "the humans have somehow managed to reverse engineer our shield harmonics. Their weapons are now calibrated to penetrate our defenses." "Was that possible?" Thrax demanded. "Should take their scientists decades to understand our technology." "They're not using scientists, sir. They're using engineers, mechanics, what they call rednecks, with too much time on their hands. They don't appear to be trying to understand our technology. They're just figuring out how to break it faster than we can repair it." Watched in growing horror as another human ship, this one apparently held together with nothing but determination and welding wire, scored a direct hit on one of his dreadnoughts, using what appeared to be a hybrid human-alien weapon system. The humans weren't just fighting his fleet. They were learning from every engagement, adapting their tactics in real time, and somehow getting stronger with every battle. "Captain," his sensor officer called out, "the human ship designated Asterisk Righteous. Fury Asterisk is powering up some kind of weapon system. Energy signature is..." "Sir, that's impossible. They're using our own power cores." Back on the Righteous Fury, Captain Webb felt the deck plates vibrate as Rodriguez's impossible creation came online. The hybrid weapon system hummed with alien energy. Channeled through human engineering and guided by good old-fashioned American spite. "All hands, this is the captain," Webb announced over the ship's intercom. "In about 10 seconds, we're either going to make history or become history. Either way, it's been an honor serving with you crazy bastards." The response came from every corner of his ship. "Hoorah! Let's do this. Give him hell, Captain." Webb looked at the alien dreadnought looming over his ship like a mechanical mountain. 6 hours ago, he would have considered this suicide. Now it just felt like Tuesday. "Fire everything," he shouted. "If we're going out, we're taking them with us." The hybrid missile launched with a sound like thunder being born, streaking toward the alien ship with human determination and alien technology working in perfect, possible harmony. But as the weapon flew toward its target, Webb noticed something on his tactical display that made his blood freeze. More alien ships were dropping out of hyperspace. A lot more. The last Vorthok ship limped away from Earth's orbit like a wounded animal fleeing a pack of wolves. Its biomechanical hull was scorched black in dozens of places, trailing debris and leaking the sickly green fluid that served as its life support system. Captain Thrax sat in his command chair, staring at the tactical displays that told the story of the most catastrophic military defeat in galactic history. In less than 18 hours, humanity had done something that should have been impossible. They'd turned a species renowned for psychological warfare into a fleet of traumatized survivors, desperately trying to escape the most terrifying prey-turned-predator encounter in recorded galactic history. "Casualty report," Thrax croaked, his voice barely a whisper. Lieutenant Krex consulted his damage assessment tablet with trembling appendages. 11 of 12 dreadnoughts destroyed or critically damaged, sir. 47 support vessels lost. Crew casualties at 83%. And sir... The survivors are requesting immediate psychological evaluation. Many are reporting what our medical staff can only describe as acute predator-prey reversal syndrome. Thrax nodded grimly. His own crew warriors who had terrorized hundreds of worlds were now afraid of the dark, jumping at shadows, and several had asked to be placed in protective isolation rather than risk another encounter with human forces. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Prepare the final transmission to High Command," he ordered, his 4 arms working to activate the long-range communication array. The message he was about to send would reshape galactic politics for the next 1,000 years. "Vorthok High Command, this is Captain Thrax aboard the Nightmare's Edge. Its mission status: catastrophic failure. Immediate tactical assessment. Abort all operations in the Sol system. The species designated humans are not prey. Repeat, they are not prey." Thrax paused, struggling to find words that could adequately convey what his fleet had experienced. How do you explain to a civilization built on fear-based conquest that they'd just encountered something that used terror as fuel for righteous fury? These creatures do not break under psychological pressure. They sharpen themselves on it, do not flee from superior force. They adapt to it, steal it, and turn it against you. In 18 hours of combat, they reverse-engineered our technology, proved our weapons, and used our own fear induction methods to broadcast what they called death metal music directly into our communication channels. He looked around his bridge at the few surviving crew members, all of whom wore the 1,000-yard stare of soldiers who'd seen something beyond their understanding. "Recommend immediate quarantine of this system. Mark it as an extinction-class threat. Do not engage. Do not provoke. Do not assume survival is possible if contact is made." Lieutenant Krex stared at the long-range sensor still focused on Earth's blue marble. "Captain, I don't understand. How is this possible? We are the masters of fear. We've conquered 300 systems using terror as our primary weapon." Thrax watched Earth grow smaller in their wake, but he knew he'd be seeing that blue planet in his nightmares for the rest of his very long life. "No, Krex, we were never the masters of fear. We were prey animals who got good at scaring other prey animals. We forgot the most fundamental rule of predator-prey relationships, which is the most dangerous creature in any ecosystem isn't the one that feels no fear, it's the one that feels it and attacks anyway." We spent so much time perfecting our ability to terrify other species that we never considered what would happen if we encountered something that turned fear into weapon-grade motivation. The news of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy faster than the speed of light. Carried by quantum communication networks that connected every major civilization, the footage was unprecedented. A primitive species that had gone from nuclear age to interstellar threat status in less than a day, using nothing but stolen alien technology, improvised weapons, what appeared to be weaponized stubbornness. On Zeridian Prime, the crystalline beings who had surrendered to the Vorthok after just 3 hours of psychological warfare watched in amazement as humans used their own terror as fuel for increasingly creative acts of violence. The footage of a group of Texas farmers using a modified combine harvester to destroy an alien dreadnought became an instant classic across a dozen star systems. The Corathon hive mind, which had collapsed into catatonic paralysis when faced with Vorthak fear weapons, studied recordings of human Marines boarding alien ships while screaming battle cries that roughly translated to "come get some" in several galactic languages. The psychological analysis reports concluded that humans appeared to possess what could only be described as adaptive aggression disorder, a condition that made them more dangerous when threatened. But it was the official response from the Galactic Dominion Council that truly cemented humanity's new status in interstellar politics. The emergency session was called within hours of receiving Thrax's transmission. The debate lasted all of 14 minutes before reaching a unanimous decision. Species designation: human, read Chancellor Vexari to the assembled delegates. Home system: Sol 3. Classification status: Apex extinction event. Threat level: maximum. Special protocols: do not engage under any circumstances. Do not provoke. Do not assume survival is possible if contact is made. These creatures appear to be fear incarnate, walking nightmares that have forgotten how to surrender. The classification was unprecedented. In the 10,000-year history of the Galactic Dominion, only 3 species had ever been rated as apex extinction events. 2 of them had been ancient civilizations that had transcended physical existence. The third had been a machine intelligence that had consumed its own creators. Humans were the first biological species to earn the designation while still confined to a single planet. The psychological profile attached to their file made for disturbing reading. Subjects demonstrate unprecedented ability to adapt to extreme stress through rapid technological innovation and tactical evolution. They appear to process fear as a positive stimulus rather than a negative one. Most concerning, they show no evidence of surrender instinct. When cornered or threatened, they become exponentially more dangerous, rather than seeking escape or submission. But perhaps the most chilling addition to their file was a simple note from a xenobiologist who had studied the combat footage. These creatures spent millions of years climbing to the top of their planet's food chain by outcompeting everything from Ice Age megafauna to each other. They didn't just survive extinction events, they thrived during them. They are quite literally evolution's answer to the question, what happens when you take fear and turn it into a weapon? As Earth's blue marble continued its peaceful rotation in the void, every predator species in the galaxy now knew a fundamental truth that would reshape interstellar relations for generations to come. Humans weren't just another conquest waiting to happen. They were the endgame boss that evolution had spent millions of years designing, perfecting, and unleashing on an unsuspecting universe. And they'd just announced their presence with 18 hours of the most spectacular violence in galactic history. The galaxy's newest apex predators had officially introduced themselves, and frankly, most civilizations were planning to keep their distance from now on. The